All right, members, we're on House Bill 6. Ms. Lowry, if you please read in the bill.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Representative Muscarello brings House Bill number 6 relative to the execution of death sentences, providing for the methods of execution, for the confidentiality of records and information related to the executions, and to provide for penalties for unauthorized disclosure of records or information relative to the same. Also, civil causes of action relative to unauthorized disclosure of information or records regarding the same. This bill was a dual referred bill, members, under House Rule 6.8 because of the public records exception.
Thank you, Ms. Lowry. Members, just to before Representative Muscarella gets on the bill, to her last comment, we are here to debate the public records aspect of the bill. This is not a debate of the death penalty itself. That was done in criminal justice yesterday. So I'm going to ask everyone to keep their questions into the scope of the public records. If not, you'll be pulled back with your question. And so everybody keep it towards the public records request. Representative Muscarella, on your bill.
Thank you, Chairman Boyer. Members, bring to you House Bill 6. And like you said, it declares that any and all records or information pertaining to the purchase, providing, or manufacturing of any drugs related to the death penalty shall be strictly confidential and not subject to public disclosure. Every state that performs the death penalty has some form of this statute in effect. And the reason we're doing this is if we want to obtain the drugs from, say, Merck, they won't provide the drugs because they're scared of being disclosed in a public records request. So this just makes it strictly confidential, and that's the content of the bill. I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Muscarella. Representative Muscarella, we do have a technical amendment I'd like to adopt, if you don't mind, just to get the bill into right posture. And I'm going to go ahead and offer up Amendment Set 364587. Ms. Lowry, on the amendment, please.
Members, it is, as the chairman said, a technical amendment. It's on page 4, line 10. It deletes the "or" between generated drugs, comma, and device drugs.
So I'm going to go ahead and offer up their amendment. Is there any objection to the adoption of the amendment? Hear no objection. That amendment is adopted. Representative Muscarella, back on your bill, and Representative Newell for a question.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning.
Good morning.
Representative Muscarella. I know this was a difficult bill. We chatted about it on yesterday. This was a difficult bill for you to develop and bring up to us. So I thank you for taking that step of courage, because folks think our job is easy, and it's not. We have a lot of internal wrestling that we do when we bring certain legislation. Some of us do, and I got that from you yesterday. But I just have a question. We just discussed it, but can you please, for those of us that are watching, who is excluded from this? Who is excluded from this list of those who are kept confidential? Identity.
Well, are you addressing the press? Are you?
No, okay. Definitely not.
Because there was an issue of the press worried that they could be prosecuted for running an article about who provided the drugs. Under the First Amendment, they're protected. So
yes, no, not them. So maybe I formed my question incorrectly. So the
who's
wardens,
protected?
Yes.
So everybody that's a part of the process, whether it be the person that's doing the lethal injection, the drug compounding pharmacy, or the pharmacist that makes the concoction to do the lethal injection, the drug manufacturer, any step in the link that is part of the process, they cannot be exposed.
Okay, and we've seen issues where folks' identity have been publicized in other matters, and just the backlash that they've gotten from that.
Right.
So this is just to protect folks who are doing their jobs.
And then I'll go in further detail on that. If they do get exposed, there will be civil penalties and punitive damages. Also, there could be criminal charges brought on behalf of that party, and they could be prosecuted for exposing the parties. So there's 2 levels that we've added, criminal and civil liability.
Okay. And I must admit that I had issues with keeping certain parties' identity concealed, considering we've been talking about truth and transparency for this session, and the fact that we have other legislation that wants to make public the name of juveniles and their defense attorneys, judges, and prosecutors. But again, you know, I don't believe that a person should be publicly ridiculed for doing their job or participating in something that's part of their job. Some people might say don't apply for that job, but somebody has to do the job. And if it's not a regular part of your job, you shouldn't have to worry about your safety or that of your families. So I'm still coming around to it. I'm settling that within myself, but I do understand the need for this, considering what's about to pass anyway. You know, I'm not going to vote against your bill, but I'm not going to make the motion to pass it either.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. I know it's a tough one. I totally respect that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Newell. Representative Thomas for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning.
Good morning.
I have a very specific question on page 3, lines 18 and 19. It seems that, let me just read it, only the identities of those persons named in specific paragraphs shall be made public. So I actually went to what that referred to, and it just seems contradictory to me, because I believe what you're attempting partially to do is to protect the identities of those people who are involved in the execution.
That's right.
Well, but that doesn't say that. Okay, that says that the identities shall be made public, and it's only those people. And the people, I didn't bring the statute with me, but it's the warden, it's witnesses, and it could be as many as 6 witnesses.
Representative Thomas, I'm going to let Ms. Lowry chime in. She's going to be able to add a little bit of substance to that for us. So
okay,
give me a
thank you.
second. Ms. Lowry?
Okay, members, the paragraphs that Representative Thomas has pointed out on page 3, lines 18 and 19, those refer specifically to the warden of the Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola or a competent person selected by him, the coroner of the parish of West Feliciana, a priest or minister of the gospel if the convict so requests it, and not less than 5 nor more than 7 other witnesses. Those are the people that paragraph F would allow those identities to be made public.
Does that address your question, Ms. Thomas? Representative Thomas?
Well,
That means
it
the
still
people that
seems
are
to me to
present
be
at-
contradictory, because I understand the public officials who are going to be present. I totally understand that. But the last one says how many witnesses may be there?
But
5?
well, I
5
think
to 7?
where we're having some disconnect is that this is people that are doing the actual execution. We're not trying to limit if you know the victim's family are there, they can be published and you know put in the paper and they were part of the process. But this is people that are actually doing the process of the execution, and anybody that provides the substances involved with doing the execution. So I think that's where there's a difference.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Representative Muscarella.
Hopefully.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Thomas. Representative Boyd?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, it kind of tacks on to what Noel was speaking about. Since we are the purpose of our session, one of the purposes is to create transparency and accountability. Wouldn't it be better, because we're using public dollars here to spend for the drugs that will be used in wouldn't it be better to add a penalty to those few bad apples that would threaten those individuals versus keeping it a secret on who it is?
Look, Representative Boyd, this is a tough issue.
It is.
It's very difficult.
And I'm not supporting anyone who would threaten anyone. I'm actually saying that they should be penalized for the threat from someone doing their job versus...
Well, they will be. This statute...
No. Let me finish, because we're seeking to keep that identity from individuals. We're seeking to keep those records from coming out publicly when public dollars are being spent on them. When what we should be doing is focusing on the few bad apples that would send the threat, whether it's in person, whether it's on Twitter, whatever it is. They should be held accountable, not me not being able to know who's doing it, since it's public dollars that's being spent.
Well, just so we're clear, if Merck decides to sell the drugs to Department of Corrections, and Merck doesn't want to be, they won't give us those drugs because they're scared of being disclosed. This law says that you cannot expose them and make that a public, so no one can, so, you know, the person performing the execution can't say, well, where did you get the drugs? We got them from Merck. If they do that, Merck won't give us the drugs. So that's the purpose.
So is Merck the only one that's delivering that drug?
Well, I mean, I'm not in the business of knowing who does.
Well, I think you should be in the business.
Well,
since this is your bill and you're specifically.
Well, I don't know. I'm not an
not.
expert on execution, so I know that there are drug manufacturers that do not want to provide us the concoction to do the execution because they're scared of being exposed.
Most
this is not a novel
because
concept.
No one has held the people who are making the threat accountable. You understand? Like, no one has taken the time to say, if you threaten these individuals for doing their job, you're going to go to jail. There's going to be a fine for you. Maybe if they felt secure and know that their safety.
I'm not clear on when you say threat. Like,
whatever it is you think that Merck is afraid of,
No.
whether it's a threat, whatever it is that you're saying, Merck is saying that they won't provide. And I'm not saying that your bill is wrong. I'm just trying to get to a different side of it. Like, those individuals that Merck is saying they feel like they're being threatened.
No, they're not saying
What are they saying? Why? If they don't get it.
This protects anybody that helps us perform the function, whether that be the pharmacist, John pharmacist that lives in, that's going to do the compounding to make the actual dosage. This protects him. He won't be put in the paper that John Doe made the
And why is he concerned about that being put in the paper?
I mean, we feel like we need to protect those parties.
Why is he concerned?
Well,
why is the drug company that you mentioned saying that if you don't protect their identity, they won't give it to you? Why are they afraid to do that?
Why are we concerned about being bashed in the media for making bad decisions? I don't know.
That is my point. If they're afraid of being threatened, I'm not trying to stop anything. I'm asking you a question.
Okay.
My point is they're afraid of what the backlash will be, whether that's being threatened, whatever it is, whether it's by the media, whether it's by an individual, for basically doing their job, providing a medication that they're being paid for from the public funds. The people who are making them feel uncomfortable, whether they're threatening them or whatever it is, why are we not doing something to those individuals versus keeping me from knowing where the drug is coming from?
I can't answer that question.
Right. Thank you.
I don't know if it can be answered, to be honest with you.
Then we should.
Thank you, Representative Boyd. Representative Marcel for a question.
Thank you. How you doing, Representative Muscle?
Doing well, thank you.
Good. Nice to see you this morning.
I saw you on a billboard on the way up here.
Oh, thank you. I'll put you up there on Black History Month next year. If this bill fails. I don't know why you did that. So you kept talking. Let's get back to the bill. You talked about Merck.
I mean, I'm using them.
And people keep throwing Merck's name around. Are you aware that Merck Company has said that they will not they have gone publicly and said they will not sell Louisiana this drug. Are you aware of that?
I think that anything's possible.
That's not my question. Anything
Well, I don't
is
have Merck
possible.
here,
I
so I
could
don't
put you up on the billboard for Black History Month, but it's not probable.
No, I don't know what Merck will do.
You're not
And I
aware
just
of it.
pulled their name out of the air, to be
Okay,
candid.
because, and the reason why I brought it up is because I keep hearing their name, and I know that they were in some conversations before when we were trying to get the drug. But my understanding and what I've heard is that Merck will not sell us the drug. So that's A.
Okay.
The question and the concerns, as I told you in the anteroom, that I have is the transparency or the lack thereof for people not knowing who the company is. You saying you're trying to protect the company from people threatening them or whatever, and perhaps it's their bottom dollar on the company, whoever gives us this drug, right? Because people may say, if you give them that drug to kill people, then I won't do business with you. I won't use your product. I think that's where we are. That's the elephant in the room. It's not that they are being threatened to be harmed. Their business may be harmed because people will say, if you provide, because there are many people, there are some people who are pro-life from the top to the bottom, and there are others that's just on the top and not the bottom. But the ones that are on the top and the bottom, they will say, we don't want to do business with you because you're providing this drug to kill people. So I think that's part of the issue. My concern, though, is when we start talking about public records, how do we know who the company is? If we're protecting the company, how do we know who owns the company? So I could own the company, a state rep. I could own that company and sell that drug. And if I'm protected, then I think that's a conflict of interest. How would the public know?
Okay.
That's my point.
First of all,
if it is confidential, the public, Joe Blow, would not know, would never know. So Muscarello could own the company and then sell the drug to the state, and you're protected so nobody knows, but it's a conflict of interest for you to own that company. How do we protect that? Because that is something that we're concerned about, right?
You want me to answer that?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, when you look at this is nobody's getting rich off of this, okay? This is a one-off situation. We have 57 people on death row. We'll probably do...
I think it's 60.
I think it's 57.
57?
But there are ethics laws in place, Representative Marcel, that would prohibit us from doing that anyway. So if you want to... under your scenario, I would be fined under the ethics laws for doing that, and I would be violating my ethics code.
But how would we know that you're violating it? It is protected. You just said it's a secret.
Look,
how do we protect ourselves from a secret? That's what I'm asking you.
This is a very narrowly tailored bill.
And it is narrowly tailored.
And it's going to take some hurdles to do it. And so unfortunately, we have to do this in order to protect the identity of the persons involved. So
I get what you're saying, Muscarello. I get it. But nobody has been able to answer this question for me. And I'm asking you as an author. You talking about you're being in violation of ethics. How would ethics know that? Because your identity is going to be hidden.
Well, I think you would know it if you were violating the ethics code. That's number one. And under this statute, you're protected. So
what you're saying is you self-reporting. To ethics. You would tell ethics. So it's not hidden anymore.
I would hope you wouldn't do it, and I don't think anybody in this body would do it.
Well, sir, I hate to tell you, but in Louisiana there have been several politicians who have gone to jail for fraud. It's called fraud, sir.
That's disappointing.
It is, but it happens. Would you agree?
I think your scenario is a red herring. It's trying to distract from what we're trying to perform here.
No, it's really not.
That's my opinion.
Okay, but that is my concern. That is a true concern of mine, that people, you may not do it and I may not do it, but there may be someone else who does it. And we can't say that no one would ever do that. I would never think that the United States would be in, and let me go down the road that Representative Boyd talked about. We're talking about protecting people from people who maliciously feel that they're wrong to provide the drug, if there's an attack on them or something. I've never heard of anybody saying we were going to blow the company up. That's, hey, tell me, maybe I missed it, or we were going to do the CEO any bodily harm. Because if that's the case, then we need to go down that road of protecting our clerks of courts as well, who's being threatened.
Let me be clear. We haven't performed an execution in close to 20 years, my appreciation. The reason we're not doing that is because we don't have this law. Every state that's doing this has this law into effect. So we can go and we can skate around the facts and say that people are going to be corrupt and do it. If you want to pass this bill and do what we've committed to under our oath, the death penalty is legal in Louisiana, period.
That's
this
correct.
isn't that debate.
Correct.
Okay, so if we want to do what we were sworn to do.
I'm talking about the public records part.
Can I finish?
Yes, sir.
Then we should pass this bill like other states have done. 26 other states have done the same exact thing. So that's all I can say.
I got it, but we could be, nothing says that we're paying the right amount, because we're not going to know who the company is or not. So, I mean, when we start talking about contracts, whether I get the contract or you get the contract, A get the contract or B get the contract, we're not going to know that because we're not going to know who's doing it. So we're not going to know, because you just said that somebody wouldn't be getting rich. We don't know if they're getting rich or not because we don't know who they are.
Well, you know,
and that's just
I have faith in the leadership that they are going to do the right thing, and you know, I disagree with your opinion on that.
I get it. Well, thank you very much. But I'm no longer on criminal justice because I would have objected to this bill yesterday. Thank you.
I respect that. I really do.
Thank you, Representative Marcel. Representative Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chairman Muscarella, good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Do we disclose or make known like the executioner's name, address, anything like that?
No.
No, we don't. What about like FISA courts and things like that? CIA officials, do we do that?
No.
Let that happen? What about attorney-client privilege? Redact stuff in court cases, things like that. We don't know if that attorney's acting ethically or not, right?
That's correct.
Because the bottom line is this is a step of justice. This is not about us dealing with the records. This is about us being able to execute justice. And like we've said many times here before, including last time we were here for a special session, we feel like, you know, we're unique, right? Never mind the fact that 25 other states do this kind of thing and it's working just fine, but we're the select example of it not working, right? And there's nothing wrong with profit, right? There's nothing wrong with somebody making a few dollars to provide a service if it's done for the right reasons. And as you mentioned, this is by law, right?
That's correct.
This is legal whether somebody likes it or not. So these types of things ultimately don't matter. It's just a case of trying to make sure that we can perform this service. If we want to get rid of it, then somebody can do that. They can run a bill to do that, right?
I've said that multiple times.
That's right. Well, I appreciate you doing this. I know this ain't fun, but thank you.
No, it's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wright. Representative Carver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Muscarella, just for clarification, the confidentiality provisions in your bill are not new or novel. They've been used successfully in other states.
I actually did this from a Texas statute, so it's not a novel concept.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Representative Carver. I was going to kind of make that point if someone didn't make it. So, Representative Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Muscarella, circling back to the ethics questions, don't we, we're talking about it would make it illegal for other parties to disclose who is involved or request those public records. But if we're an elected official, you and I file ethics reports every year, we would be we state where our income comes from and the amount of that income, which would be easily verifiable for the state to say, Josh made X number of dollars from the state, which is more than his salary as a state representative, and therefore they would raise some ethics questions if I was doing business with the state, right? That is the question that was brought up. And so this is not going to prevent any of us from running a business, providing lethal injection or capital punishment services without anyone knowing. We would still have to disclose our income, and that we would be able to verify that we are, in theory, making more than what our salary from the state of Louisiana allows for. Isn't that correct?
Very good point.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Carlson. Representative Muscarella, this is going to clear the board for now. We have a stack of witnesses cards, so we're going to start bringing those up, if you wouldn't mind giving up that seat for now. And just to those coming up with witnesses with your cards, we're going to remind you the same thing that if you were just walking in, that I reminded the members earlier. This is regarding the public records request portion, so please keep your comments on the public records. This is not rehashing the death penalty, so just make sure we keep it on the public records. And just respect with the stack of cards we have from a testimony standpoint. We're going to go ahead and start with our green cards. President would like to speak. Ms. Danilee Burton.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Burton. If you don't mind, please go ahead and have a seat and introduce yourself for the committee, and welcome to House and Governmental Affairs.
My name is Danilee Burton. I flew in from Florida. I'm a third-generation New Orleanian. I'd like to share with you my story. When my son Etienne was 11 months old, he took his very first steps. On this morning, we were to have our very first family portrait with his father and his 2.5-year-old sister.
Ms. Burton, I know,
emotional.
Yeah, I know this could be difficult. We also ask you just to make sure that mic in front of you is movable. You can move it to you if you'd like. It slides on the desk, but just speak into the mic, please. Thank you.
All right.
And take your time.
So on this morning, which was full of hope, we were carjacked in front of our home. I was held at gunpoint, and I was trapped in my car. The gunman insisted that I get out of the car, and I couldn't. He blocked my only way out. He had the gun to my head. I couldn't get out of the car, and I begged and pleaded for the life of my children. And when I asked him about my children, he took the gun and he pointed at both of their heads, 11-month-old and a 2.5-year-old. I would be shot 4 times, and my baby, he was shot in the head. He would die in my arms 2 days later. It was very hard explaining that to my 2.5-year-old daughter, that her brother was dead. 2 days before this carjacking, the gunman shot Gary Booker in the back 8 times, killing him. Why are the rights of murderers more important than the victims? Why did they get a second chance? What are we telling society when taking anger management, getting your GED, and time served makes up for killing someone, because life in prison does not mean life anymore? I have a great deal of compassion in my heart, but that does not exclude me from saying, please be swift and firm with sentencing. Please stop the endless appeals. My son's murderer has had over 20 appeals and counting. Every time an appeal happens, I relive this day, this moment, my son dying in my arms. Not a day goes by that I don't miss my son, that I don't long for his presence. his voice has been forever silenced. Hear him now. Give him justice. Let society know that murder has a severe consequence, death. If this bill will help move this forward, please consider it. Just imagine if all the resources used for murderers could be used to build schools, affordable housing, youth programs, resources for those who value life, not those who have murdered children and innocent victims. I'm all for programs which enrich and provide tools for people to become successful in life. My daughter got her master's in clinical child therapy at Loyola University. She worked for the DA's office with the Youth Diversion Program for several years and continues to serve our community. She's an amazing, beautiful soul. My son will never have the opportunity to serve our community. This is not about revenge. This is about justice. Please hear the voice of the victims and those who have been forever silenced. Please. I thank you for your service, and I know your decisions are very hard. And when I share this story, it's really hard for me because I'm opening up all of these wounds, and I do hope that you move forward and that these bills can go forward and so that the execution can be followed through. It's been 28 years now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Burton. You have a couple of people with you. Do you wish to identify yourselves?
This is my mother and my brother.
If you don't mind, maybe just speak your name into the mic for is there something you would like to add to this as well?
Yes.
Okay, if you don't mind, introduce yourself for the record.
Okay, my name is Sandy Riches, and I'm the mother of Dana and the grandmother of Etienne. And I'm speaking from the heart of a grandmother and a mother. I'm speaking here was for the clemency hearing, but I'm saying this again. I do not think Clifford DeRoos should receive clemency. My grandson Etienne Jean-Passac's life was taken in a heinous attempted carjacking on November the 6th in 1995 in New Orleans. Like Dana said, they were leaving town due to the crime, and they were on their way to get that family portrait that was never taken. My daughter was shot 4 times. My 2.5-year-old granddaughter was in the car and had injuries from flying glass. That day changed our lives forever, forever. The loss never goes away. The empty chair at the holidays, birthday celebrations, and everyday life that Etienne did not have the chance to live or be a part of. He was sentenced to death that day, and it was the choice of that man with that gun in his hand. If you only knew the car, I call it it was just a piece of metal. The door wouldn't even open. That's why Dana couldn't get out of the car at his demand.
The value was $500, and the street value was $50.
Look, just to I want to kind of rein y'all in a little bit, just because y'all heard what I mentioned to the committee. So just keep it to the bill, please.
Yeah. I think the impact that he would have had on our lives and the world would have been impressive. We know that Mr. DeRoos shot and killed Etienne. He was convicted and given the death penalty. The extreme pain and the memories the families must go through, not just ours, but all of them. It was horrendous trying to get ready for all of this. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. You'd like to introduce yourself for the committee?
Sure. Hello. My name is Michael Riches. Dana's my sister, and this is my mother. And I support what they say in Mr. Muscarella's bill.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony this morning.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Sorry. It was press. Give me 1 second. Representative Newell has a question. Representative Newell, sorry about that. She did have it pressed. I got sidetracked. Representative Newell, on your question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Ms. Burton family, I appreciate you coming. I know this, I don't know, but I respect the fact that this was a hard moment in your life and trying to explain to a 2.5-year-old that her brother was gone. It was hard trying to explain to me that my mama was gone, so I understand to a 2.5-year-old. But in reliance with the bill and what we're discussing today, because we discussed the death penalty yesterday in criminal justice, and we know that that's the law of the state. I'm sorry about the time that is taken, and unfortunately, the wheels of justice move so slowly that it's almost at a grinding halt. But in relation to what we're discussing today in keeping the identities of certain parties, people who are doing their jobs, people who are coming in to provide counsel to or comfort to the families or providing the last rites to those who are being executed. What's your stance on that? How do you feel about that?
Yeah.
So would it
just
be
real quick?
Just that.
One of the things she did say in her comments, and just to kind of, is that she feels that this portion of it helps the bill move forward. I just kind of wrote that down as kind of a portion. So I think that was kind of their big issue with it. But if you have additional comments,
It was, and I wanted to share my story so you can know who it's coming from, because it's near and dear to my heart. And from what I understand, and also I was supposed to speak yesterday. And I thought I was told today would be the day. But I do feel that, from what I understand, it seems like this is what is holding it back, or one of the things that's holding back moving forward. That would be my concern. And then hearing the voice of an actual victim, because I feel like it seems it's very weighted on the criminal side. I feel like I'm left behind in the dirt and kind of dragged around every time we go through this, and it's not resolved. I do feel that this bill, from what I understand, it seems like that could be a big barrier. People not have, do we need to know who the manufacturer is? There will be people who know within your administration, I would imagine. Someone knows. But I think it's about keeping it from the public. The world we live in today is not the world we lived in 20, 30 years ago, with how people are dragged through social media and such. They have their reasonings. But if this helps it to move forward, I think that's what we need to think about. So many resources are wasted on it makes it sound like we're not compassionate, but I am compassionate. I just think that, and I believe in God, and these people will find their way if they have, God has mercy, and when they're on the other side. But let's move this forward. I think this may be a barrier that would help that.
And I asked again because it seems like most of the conversation has been about the intravenous drugs that we're trying to get, but we are expanding the methods of death penalty to include the injection as well as the nitrogen hypoxia, and going back to the electrocution. Mm-hmm. So it's not just the drug. So it's about anybody that participates in it. So I just wanted you to go and just to expound on how you feel about the people who are participating in either portion, not just the companies being
sure. I think being
their identity being concealed, but as well as the warden, the priests, the folks that are there, the witnesses that are there whose identities might also be covered. I just wanted to know from, unfortunately, a victim's perspective about the
So
public records.
you're asking
of this
if
bill.
it should be confidential, all the people participating?
I'm not asking you if it should. I'm asking you about your opinion of it, and that's I was just asking for you to expound on it all because you just mentioned it in your statement, and I just want to bring it to your attention that we're not just talking about drug companies because we're going to 3 modes of execution now, where we were just at 1. We had the electric chair up until the early mid 90s, and then we transferred to the injections, which we were no longer able to get the drugs for, and now with this bill, we'll be moving towards the injection, the electric chair, as well as the nitrogen hypoxia. So we're expanding from 1 to 3.
Representative Newell, again, I mean, I think she made her point clear that this was going to help the whole bill move forward. But
And if you're asking me what I think about these forms,
nope.
Or because I'm okay with I'm okay with all of them.
I'm clear. Thank you very much for coming, and I am sorry that you had to come in the.
I do this. I'm doing this for my son and for our community, and for the safety of others, and that our society knows that there's a consequence, a grave one. So if this bill helps that move forward, then I think it's very important.
I thank you for
because
coming.
there's no mercy for the victim.
It's not, and I thank you for coming and sharing your story with us.
But if you have,
thank you, Representative Newell. Representative Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to give you my heart is with you. I think every parent, grandparent in this committee, probably in this building, would feel exactly the same way. So want to validate that, want you to know that my heart goes out. But I also hate bullies. So the bullies that are threatening drug companies or whatever they're doing, whether it's on social media or in private or going to the businesses or whatever it is, they should be held accountable too. So that I wanted you to know that.
I guess this is to prevent it, possibly, right?
I'm right in the middle.
Yeah.
I'm just making a statement. I'm not looking for a response. That we support you on that. I definitely think that Clifford needs his day, and sooner than later.
Thank you.
I also believe that if this particular company, and whatever company it is, if their hesitation is because they're receiving threats, whether it's on social media, whatever it is, that the person that's behind that keyboard needs to be held accountable as well.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Boyd. Thank you all for your testimony today. That clears the board. Thank you for coming in. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We also have here in favor, the present, not wishing to speak, Mr. Michael Renatza with the Louisiana Sheriff's Association, Ms. Monique Hibbs with the survivor of violent crime. She's a survivor of violent crime. And Mr. Philip having trouble, Terrell with Rapides. Is it DA? So it doesn't say if you wanted to speak or if you were just here in support and not wishing to speak. Thank you, Mr. Terrell. So we also have President would like to speak in support. Representative Governor Landry, is Mr. Maxwell in here? Is he wishing to speak? No? Okay. Thank you. All right. We'll move on to some testimony in opposition who would like to speak. We'll start with Mr. Michael Calhoun with the Promise of Justice Initiative. And up next, we're going to have Ms. Stephanie Willis of the ACLU. If you'd like to come up as well, y'all can share the table, or if you want to come up separately, you're welcome to do that. Mr. Calhoun, would you please go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, committee. My name is Michael Calhoun from the Promise of Justice Initiative. We're a nonprofit in New Orleans, actually in your district, Representative Newell. And I'm coming today to clarify some of the technical aspects around the public records side of this bill. And, you know, we say justice is blind, but that doesn't mean that we do justice in the dark. And that's exactly what this bill seeks to do. You know, Representative Muscarello said that every state with the death penalty besides us has this bill or a version of this bill. That is inaccurate. That is not true. 26 states, including us, have the death penalty. I think 12 have some version of secrecy, and very few have any version of secrecy. I believe maybe none, with the type of penalty structure that this bill has, with the criminal penalties. And to clarify another point, the individuals who participate in executions are already secret by Louisiana state law. The wardens, the people that participate, all of that are already secret. What this bill does is make the providers and the companies secret and allows for a compounding system where they could get it from. Because the drug companies aren't afraid of being bullied. They have moral objections. Merck, Pfizer, these companies don't want to sell their products for them to be used in executions, which is their right. It is private enterprise. They get to say that they have objections. I mean, these are multi-billion-dollar companies. They're not afraid of the intimidation that they would receive. You know, I've done lots of advocacy on this issue. It looks like prayer vigils. It looks like petitions. It doesn't look like terrorism. They have a moral objection. So what this bill is allowing is for a subversion of the will of the drug company so that the state could buy it in secret, say they're going to use it for something else, and then use it to execute people against the will of business. Or what they could do is create it themselves through a compounding pharmacy, and this bill exempts that compounding pharmacy from every bit of regulation that we have in the state to maintain a safe drug supply. Licensing, safety, procurement, distribution of dangerous narcotics are all exempted from any sort of public scrutiny under this law. So, and the purpose of that is only so that a company could be contracted without public bid, without any sort of scrutiny, to produce these drugs. And to one of the points made before, the ethics, it would just say compounding pharmacy would be the source of income. It wouldn't say necessarily what was produced or why. So that would be the issue with that. And a compounding pharmacy is essentially a drug manufacturer, and we have statements from pharmacists that will clear that up. But they're going to manufacture these drugs without public bid, without being publicly acknowledged. And you know, Representative Muscarello also said nobody is getting rich under this. Well, no one would know because there is no public procurement process in Arizona. But they didn't have this sort of secrecy sort of provision at the time. You know, one of the pharmacies were getting paid $1.5 million per dose for this. So that's rich to me. So I do think, you know, the merits of the death penalty, totally understand that was debated in criminal justice yesterday. This is about the public records access. Our compassion obviously goes with everybody who's experienced violence, regardless of how they feel about the death penalty itself. I just think this is a really dangerous bill in terms of this public records aspect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Calhoun. We have a question for you. Representative Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'm trying to confirm something that you just said that I think I'm going to disagree with, but you suggested that a department could buy it under some pretense and then use it for something different like this. Is that right?
Well, we wouldn't know what they would use it for.
Okay, so would the only department in here, listed in here, is Department of Public Safety and Corrections. Mm-hmm. So what type of drug would they use in corrections or public safety that they would turn around, buy under an open public bid, and then turn around and say, no, we're going to use it to kill somebody? Like
midazolam.
Okay, so that's one, but that may not be everything involved, right? Okay.
Or pentobarbital.
Okay, so what would they use it for other things?
Midazolam is a very common sedative used in oral surgery and cataract surgery. And,
okay. Yeah. But you're suggesting like it's deception. Like they would use deception. Okay, so you're prejudging a public official appointed under civil service that they're going to basically lie over this to participate in a public execution, which we haven't had one in 28 years. I mean, I find that a stretch to suggest that's a reason why we shouldn't do this.
I'm not saying it would necessarily...
And to suggest that the compounding pharmacy or the manufacturer is not part of this process, not unlike the executioner or the bureaucrats or whatever is involved, I think is wrong too. They are a part of it. They might be a private, but they are performing a public service by manufacturing and selling to us. It's part of that process, whether they're a private citizen or not. I mean, if I'm a jury, if I'm a jurist, right, I'm part of a jury, right, I'm still a private citizen. I'm making a decision within a public process. Like, that doesn't match. I'm sorry. Thank you.
I'll just say I wasn't it would allow for that to happen, that deception, and it would protect under law, and it would create a framework where it could happen. And I think when we make policy, we can't just assume that things that are made explicitly possible in policy won't happen because we don't want them to.
Oh, I said thank you. Yes, thank you, sir.
Other question? Rep. Thomas?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Mr. Calhoun, I think that I would like to refer you to page 3 of the bill, lines 18 and 19, because when you said, I can read it to you. When you said that the people who are in the room or who are there observing and carrying out the execution are already protected, that is absolutely incorrect.
Well, those are two separate groups, yeah. The witnesses and the people.
What this says, and I will read it to you so that you don't have to look it up on your phone. It says, only the identities of those persons named in paragraphs A1, and that's a whole list of people, including the warden and so forth, clergy if necessary, shall be made public. So their identities are not protected. It says shall be made public. Just for clarity.
So the witnesses of the execution are public, and the media representatives, the people that participate are the phlebotomists, the doctors, the people that participate in the actual execution. Under current law, unless you're saying that this law changes that.
No, this is current law.
They're protected now. No, the warden's not, because there's only one warden of Angola.
Did you hear the words that I said? Shall be made public. That's current law. That is current law. So they are not protected under this law. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you. Any more questions? Thank you, Mr. Clay, Mr. Calhoun. Thank you. At the table, we also have Ms. Stephanie Willis.
Yes. Good morning. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Stephanie L. Willis. I'm the policy strategist at the ACLU of Louisiana. First off, I would sincerely like to extend my dearest condolences for those who lost loved ones. That is not something that anyone should ever have to experience, and I apologize that you have all had to experience this for such a long period of time. The feeling never goes away, but I do hope that you all are able to find peace, because at the end of the day, that's all we want, right? I'm not here today to talk about the merits of the death penalty. What I am here to talk about is the transparency aspect of it. We came here during this special session with calls of transparency in the criminal justice system. What are we doing here today seeking to cloak this process. If we're calling for transparency, I just came from the Administration of Criminal Justice, where they are attempting to publish records for juveniles. If we're seeking to be transparent in that aspect, why are we not seeking to do that here? Why not? This bill, if passed, would allow this process to go through under a cloak, under a cloak or a veil of confidentiality. It would prohibit due process rights from making information necessary to challenge the constitutionality of lethal injection. In 2014, a bill like this was brought previously, and it was then removed. We need to ask questions about that before we move forward so quickly with aspects of this bill that essentially have detrimental effects. Again, I am not here to talk about the merits of the death penalty at this time. That was discussed yesterday. What I'm here for is for you to ask you all to sincerely consider why we're not being transparent with this. Why? If we're seeking to be transparent in all other methods, we need to do it all the way. We can't pick and choose. We can't have it one way for some people and not for others. In instances where there are more individuals held on death row than others, let's consider why this is not being made transparent to everyone. And with that, I close. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Willis. We have a question from Representative Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So I just want to go back to this transparency, consistency issue. So we go to war. We have a CIA. We have an FBI, right? We've got a military, right?
Sure.
Is everything they do transparent?
But we're not talking about the CIA.
No, we are talking about them in a second. But please, just answer the question.
But I'm not here to talk about the CIA.
I am, because you're asking for consistency.
We're talking about
whether we go to war, use intelligence.
We're not talking about war.
Chair?
You asked me a question. We're not talking about
I'm now
war.
talking.
Let him finish. Let him finish asking the question.
Sure.
When we go to war, we use the power of force of the state to ensure order. When we do the death penalty, we use the power of force in the state to ensure order. There's no difference. In principle, those are the same two things. People don't want to go to war. I get that, respect that, but we still have chosen to do that. And in going to war, we redact names, we go to FISA court, we protect CIA agents, we protect processes. There's a whole lot more than just that. It's no different with this. It's just at a smaller level. And the idea that this is some Wild West thing is kind of crazy. I mean, we talked about the idea of buying a drug and using it for a totally different thing as if we're trying to play some subterfuge. I mean, look here, we got the department's supposed to comply with every federal regulation for dispensing, you name it, okay? So it's not like we're just kind of saying, hey, man, we're going to close this up and nobody's going to know what's going on. I really don't mind people objecting to this. I get that, honestly. And there's been a few questions in my mind about this, but I feel like we have started to throw examples against the wall for this over nothing, just to kind of get in the way. People don't like the death penalty, I get it, but we just can't be making these comparisons that don't merit water. Thank you.
You're welcome. And so
I'd say thank you to him.
But that's fine. You don't have to thank me. But I'm telling you thank you for your comments because I'm going to respond to them.
That's fine. So, Mr. Chair, this is a little out of line, if you ask me.
Representative, you had a question to ask, and you can allow her to answer your question.
Mr. Chair, but I don't need to be talked to like that. I said thank you to you like I was finished.
Representative Wright.
Are we going to allow witnesses to talk to the committee like this?
Representative Wright, you had the microphone to ask a question, and you made a statement, and she's allowed to respond to it. That's cordial. That's proper. Let her respond, please.
Other committees.
Thank you. So, to respond to your comment and your question, I would not equate war to the death penalty. I would not do that. Secondly, as I stated before, I'm not here to discuss the merits of the death penalty. I didn't do that. What I'm here to talk about is the transparency, and that's all I talked about. I'm not trying to stick other matters to this. I came here and I clearly stated that the reason why I'm here today is because we're calling for transparency. So why aren't we calling for transparency in this matter as well? That's it. I'm here to advocate and to make you think about these things before we pass them into law, and that's it. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me, and I appreciate all comments because it instills healthy discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Willis. Representative Carlson, you have a question for them at the table?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to ask this, and you kind of posed the question to us. I think it's important to respond and to piggyback after what Mr. Representative Wright said. We're not discussing the transparency in the criminal justice case or in the criminal justice process here today. In this scenario, the criminal justice process has already played itself out. There's been trials, there's been hearings, there have been appeals, there have been appeals, there have been more appeals. We're talking about a protection for those who are fulfilling the punishment. They are not involved in the criminal justice process. It is the same reason why we protect the identities of jurors, so that they can make an impartial, unbiased decision without threat of intimidation from someone in the courtroom or someone in the media or someone who's going to see what's in the media. These folks that are fulfilling the execution order or helping fulfill it, they are not involved in the criminal justice process, and we need to be able to protect them so they can fulfill their responsibility without threat of retribution, reprisal, or threat of violence. So it is not about, this is not, for me, a question of transparency of criminal justice process. It is not undermining people's constitutional rights, as you suggested earlier. They have already had all of their constitutional rights and their opportunities to make their voice heard and stand before a jury of their peers. That process is closed and done. We are simply talking about those who are helping facilitate the judgment rendered by the judge and the jury, period. It has nothing to do with their constitutional rights. Those rights have already been played out in the criminal justice process, and we're talking about something completely separate and different. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Rep. Carlson. So I beg to differ. As you know, individuals who are on death row, would you agree with me that they still have opportunities to attempt for that final sentence to not happen? Am I correct?
Just go ahead and make it your statement.
Yes. Okay. So essentially, and I apologize for asking a question. I know that I'm not supposed to do that, but essentially, what this bill would ultimately do is shields the transparency with regards to who we're receiving some of the products from. Am I correct? You don't have to answer that. But why wouldn't we want to receive that information? Why shouldn't we have that information? If, God forbid, there is an instance where there is something wrong that happens during that process, how will we be able to know what happened? Those are the things that I'm thinking about. And again, I thank you for your comments and your questions, and just two people having two varying opinions, and so I thank you for your time. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ms. Willis. Representative Weibel, question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I sincerely appreciate both of you being here, and I know we'll hear testimony from others, and I appreciate the process. And quite frankly, just to put it out there, personally, I've struggled with this entire issue to this point. I just want to know, at what point do we focus on the victims? Like, we hear we have due process, as my colleague pointed out. We have all of those processes. You have the appeals. You have all of the things. But at what point do we come to the table and say, to have a society that is of order and of justice and of righteousness, why don't we focus on that child? Where were his appeals? Where was his transparency? And all the other victims we hear from. We're talking about, I'm not that good at math, but
neither am I.
A point and a bunch of zeros and a number percent of people who have made active choices in their lives to do bad things. But we're talking about a much larger percentage of people who have been victimized, families, generations. Maybe this question is rhetorical. This process has certainly helped me come to my conclusion on the issue. But when do we prioritize them? Thank you.
You're welcome. And as you noticed, the first thing that I said was I addressed my comments to them. So.
And I'll just, because I think you directed at both of us, I do think that is a fair question, something we have to think about, and acts of violence committed by individuals are certainly something we have to hold people accountable for. And I do think the difference here is this is an act being carried out by the state, not equating the two, but it is a part of the process, and the state has an obligation to do it in accordance with the laws, with the Constitution, with transparency, because it's being done in all of our names. And, the fact is that 80% of death cases are at some point reversed by the Louisiana Supreme Court. And so I do think one of the big problems that happens is district attorneys assure victims of an outcome that they cannot promise. They make, and I know that's been one of the big themes, is like fulfilling a promise made. But I think one of the big challenges are people are making promises at the very beginning of cases that they don't know how or even if they will be able to fulfill, and that is a problem.
Thank you. Representative Newell, a question.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I heard some deep breaths. Yes, I always take a bite at the apple. Thank you all for coming to the table and presenting your comments. And when Representative Muscarella was at this table, I did express my concerns over the fact that we are discussing keeping private or shielding the names of some participants when we are in a session of truth and transparency. That was the very first statement I made. As we have been discussing this, I am, some other things are being revealed to me. But again, we are not only talking about confidentiality of the pharmaceutical companies where these drugs are being purchased. We are also discussing the confidentiality of people who are doing their jobs. And I know those of you who have been in this room all day have heard me say this again, but folks that are just tuning in, we are only protecting those who are doing their jobs as well as the companies we are buying these drugs from. as Representative Thomas was mentioning earlier about those who are whose names are kept public, it's, if you want to follow along, it's in Revised Statute Chapter number 15, Section 570, and it starts with paragraph A, subsection 1. The people whose names are made public are the warden of Angola, who we can Google and find, the coroner of West Feliciana Parish, which we can Google and find, the priest or the minister, if the convict requests their spiritual advisor to come, that person's name is made public, as well as a witness. I'm fine with a witness's name being made public, because if you decided to volunteer and go sit in that room, we should know. So I'm fine with those people's names being made public. But this bill is to expand on those who participate or perform ancillary functions in an execution, and I have moved down to paragraph G in the section that I mentioned. Those who participate or perform ancillary functions in the execution of the death sentence. We are trying to keep those people's identity separate or concealed, and that going back up to subsection 3 and 4 of paragraph A, that is the physician summoned by the warden or a competent person selected by the warden to administer the lethal injection. These are people who are doing their jobs, whose names should not be made public. And this bill, from reading and discussing, I know y'all saw us talking, we wasn't talking about what we eating for lunch today, we were talking about and discussing what we're reading now. And this bill seems to make it a little bit more clear, because my time in law school gave me a lot of heartburn as to how much gray matter we have in our Louisiana state statute. And what Representative Muscarello has done is to make things a little bit more clearly by listing out who is being protected, what jobs, their functions are being protected, and the pharmaceutical companies. And I told him that gave me a little pause, but I'm okay with keeping folks who are doing their jobs, keeping them protected. We have seen that in the political climate that we're in today, the public has no regard for people doing their jobs when it comes to threatening their lives if they're doing something that goes against their personal interests or going against someone they like. I don't like that, because we all have a job to do that somebody doesn't like. There's somebody at home that despises all of us that's sitting up here right now because they think we're doing something against their personal interests. But I am in favor of protecting folks again who are doing their jobs. The truth and transparency portion and keeping confidentiality pharmacies, again, that gives me pause. But I'm not going to throw out, how they go throw out the baby with the bathwater. We're not going to do that.
We appreciate that, Representative Newell.
And I just wanted to make that clear as to what we're here discussing. And we don't need to have the tension between us and the public and those who are bringing us information and those who are coming to share their stories. We need to listen, because listening, we learn something new. Just like I mentioned, I've gotten more clarity as to what is actually being done in this bill. And that's my comments.
Thank you, Representative Newell. The board is clear. Thank you all for being here with us today. Next, we're going to call up Mr. Peter Robbins-Brown with Louisiana Progress Action, and Mr. Gary Clements. If y'all wouldn't mind sharing the table. Next in line, just to kind of be ready to go, because we do have, and members, just to remind you, we do have a handful of people who want to speak, so keep your questions as precise as possible. Next in line is going to be Claude Michael Como, so just kind of be ready to go, Mr. Como. Mr. Robbins-Brown?
Good morning, everybody. Peter Robbins Brown, Louisiana Progress. We're discussing some really important issues here, right? There's actually a layered aspect where we're talking about an important issue on top of an important issue. Sometimes we aren't even dealing with one important issue. You know, I'm looking at the picture behind me in the screen, and I feel it's unnecessary to say this also because of what Rep. Bible was saying, but that baby looks a lot like the one I have at home. If what happened to this family behind me, and it's easier to speak, and I see you in the, yeah, so happened to me, I would probably seek retribution at the most extreme way possible. I can't and honestly don't want to imagine what they're going through, because it's, to Rep. Boyd's point, something that stays with them every day, I imagine. I would, you know, probably wake up and feel it all day long. And having said that, you know, like I said, I would probably want to see the most extreme punishment possible taken, but as legislators, as the government, it's not about what one person feels or one family feels in one instance. We have to look, you all have to look at the big picture and how these things impact society, including this transparency aspect, right? We have to think about what's right and what's wrong for everybody. And there's an amount of your job that is sort of the removal from that personal, individual, whether it's seeking retribution or whatever it may be in any other case, and seeing the big picture. That's, in a lot of ways, what y'all ran for office to do and were elected to do. You know, I and Louisiana Progress, we object to this bill, because this aspect of the bill, because we are generally in favor of transparency in all cases. I think, you know, we've actually been in this committee, for those of you who are returning members, many times speaking in favor of transparency across numerous different issues. I think that an important, or a major problem we have in this state and in this country is lack of faith from the public toward the government, toward elected officials. And there are a lot of things that we can try to do to improve that. It's an important thing that we try to improve that, right? Because when people lose faith in their elected officials and their government, that creates a wide range of problems that go beyond a specific issue. And I think one of the most effective ways that we can work to build that trust is through increasing transparency in every way possible. So when I see something, especially on such an important issue where we're going the opposite direction, that is just very, very, very concerning to me. And I would hope that you see it in that context of sort of how the public might think of removing transparency and what that might, the mindset that might put them in, and what is already a very skeptical, if not just fully cynical mindset that a lot of people have toward government and elected officials. In terms of a specific point, we did, Rep. Muscarella, when he was presenting, talked about the concerns around media reporting and exposure on these issues, and that was protected by the First Amendment. The media members themselves might be protected, but I do have some concerns around, for instance, their sources. Would those sources be protected if, for instance, the advocate or whoever was sued for reporting on this, their journalists might be protected, but then if you dig further, you find the sources are those people then looking at up to 2 years in prison, $50,000 fines. What if it's just something fairly random? You're at Thanksgiving, you're sitting next to your cousin says, you know, I work at a compounding pharmacy, you know, XYZ Pharmaceuticals that makes this. You put something up on Facebook, you're not aware of this law. I mean, we know that, you know, a large majority of people aren't following every law that comes out of the legislature. Is that person now looking at 2 years, $50,000 fine for something that they just wouldn't have even thought of? So I think when we, again, think through all the potential ramifications on this disclosure piece, we are potentially criminalizing a lot of what could easily be just mistaken behavior, or, you know, something that is really not done in bad faith or in an attempt to bully or put anybody in jeopardy, that it just kind of happenstance wise. You know, I do think because we're talking about such a serious issue, I do wonder, you know, about why we are trying to, you know, sort of hide this and that's how I do think of it when we talk about taking away transparency, is we're hiding something. If we're not ashamed, if the drug makers aren't ashamed of what they're doing, why are they trying to hide? I think that the sense of shame talks about that there's something that in some way, shape, or form we feel, or the people involved, feel like what they're doing is not right. If not, they might not be trying to hide this. And in fact, what we're talking about is doing something that is truly more serious and extraordinary when we talk about state-sanctioned murder than pretty much anything else the state does. I would argue maybe more serious and extraordinary than anything the state does. And so I would actually say in this case, we should be looking not to hide or remove transparency, but maybe going the opposite direction. If we're going to engage in such serious and extraordinary steps, we should also actually maybe be looking at serious and extraordinary steps toward more transparency, because we should be taking responsibility and accountability for making what is the most consequential decision that we as a state, you all as legislators and as government can make, which is state-sanctioned murder. And so I have a lot of, obviously, issues. I thank you for the time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Robbins-Brown. Very good job of keeping it on the subject of why we're here today. Very, very professional. Ms. Marcel, is this a question for Mr. Brown or for the chair?
No, it's not a question. In the interest of the number of speakers that we have, I wish we'd have done this in the beginning, but I think we should limit the comments to 3 minutes, because we could be here all day if we don't put a limitation on it, and we want everybody to have an opportunity to speak. Okay. I hate to do it.
Did I stay inside 3 minutes? I feel like I was...
No, you was about 6.
6? No, come on.
Your introduction was about 3.
I appreciate that. Representative Marcel has made a motion that we adopt the 3-minute rule. Is there any opposition to that?
That includes us.
Yeah, that includes us. The 3-minute rule is adopted. Mr. Robbins-Brown, there are no questions for you. Thank you for your testimony. At this time, as he leaves the chair, if Claude Michael Como could come on up, and we'll go ahead and I beg your pardon? I'll waive speaking. Okay, Claude's going to waive speaking. If we could have Cecilia Capel with the Capital Appeals Project come in here and sit, and we'll go ahead and call on Mr. Gary Clements. Mr. Clements, thank you for being with us today. If you could please introduce yourself for the records.
Sure. My name is Gary P. Clements. I'm a retired attorney. I spent 30 years doing capital defense work. And I want to say personally that I have no animus against you or the loss of Etienne. It is just...
Excuse me, if you don't mind, speak into the microphone.
I was expressing my condolences to the family. I would like to speak to specifics and not generalities. I have examples of why this particular piece of legislation is misguided and why it's specific. We're going back 10 years to the year 2014. There was an execution set for Ash Wednesday of Christopher Sepulveda. A week before that execution was set, there were protocols that were set by the state, how they were going, which chemicals they were going to use, and so forth. It turned out that they had run out of one of the chemicals, and they were in a bind how to get it. And I'm going to read to you from an article that was published on August the 6th, 2014. And important about that date is that is after the end of the closing of the regular session of the legislature in 2014, when a very similar bill was attempted and raised by Representative Joseph Lopinto, chair of your next door neighbor at the ACJ, and he had the same thing about putting protections against identifying drug manufacturers, et cetera, et cetera. I'll go into the reasons why these things are important, but first I want to just go through this. And In January, and this is 2014, as the date of Christopher Sepulveda's execution approached, the Louisiana DOC did not have the drugs it needed to carry out his death sentence. So the state turned to a supplier that uses hydromorphone to relieve patients' sufferings, not to kill them. They went to the Lake Charles Memorial Hospital. Quote, we assumed the drug, we assumed the drug was for one of their patients, so we sent it. We did not realize what the focus was, said Ulysses Jean Thibodeau, a board member for the private nonprofit hospital and happens to be chief judge of the Louisiana Third Circuit Court of Appeal. Had we known of the real use, he said, we never would have done it. The Department of Corrections bought 20 vials of the drug on January 28, 2014, a week before Sepulveda's scheduled execution. And I might parenthetically add here that they also published the fact they were changing the drugs 1 week before the execution, which is why a federal court came in. And I really ask for your indulgence on this.
Yeah, if you don't mind, just kind of keep it concise and go to close in case we have a question. So we've adopted that rule.
This is a perfect example of what's going on. How do we know this even happened? And again, this brings the question, where was the source of this? The source of this information was the DOC itself in litigation on the lethal injection situation. And they turned it over in federal district court in the Middle District of Louisiana in August. And that document then got passed by people to reporters who then ferreted out the details and corroborated all of this situation. And this was published. And
so, Mr. Clements, again, we've adopted this rule. So if you got a final word, go ahead and say it. And if not, we have to go on to our next.
This isn't the only thing. People are saying, is there hypothetical somebody's going to do something shifty? That's the kind of shifty thing we're talking about. And the other thing is, I want to read one other thing, and that is this. This is from an article from 2002, ironically also from...
Again, we're out of time. We have a bunch of other witnesses. We don't have any questions for you.
An executioner who pushed...
If you'd like to distribute it to the committee, we can make copies and get it to every committee member. So
I will do so.
I appreciate it. Thank you for your testimony.
It has to do with the syringe pusher quitting after 4 times.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
So we have with us Ms. Cecilia Capel with the Capital Appeals Project, and Mr. Tom Costanza, you're on deck with the Louisiana Conference of Catholic Bishops. Ms. Capel, please introduce yourself for the records.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Cecilia Capel, and I represent men sentenced to death in Louisiana. I'm not here to talk about the death penalty. I am here to talk about secrecy and transparency in government. And I have 3 examples that I have experienced in which government transparency has prevented a miscarriage of justice from happening. The first example I want to give was from this Monday, February the 19th. I had the privilege of sharing a meal with my client, Jarrell Neal, who spent 25 years on death row before he was released in October of last year. This was his first birthday as a free man since he was 21 in 1998 before he was convicted. It was because of public records that we were able to discover that his conviction was wrongful, and he is released on bail right now. And it was such a joy to be able to share that meal with him. That wouldn't have happened without public records and being able to access his case file. A second example I want to give is when the Department of Corrections had drugs that it had set aside for executions. At the time, it was pentobarbital. And the pharmacy board did their normal investigation. They have jurisdiction over the pharmacies in the state, including the Department of Corrections pharmacy. And they went in and did a review and found that the execution drugs were expired. And under this bill, the pharmacy board would be deprived of that jurisdiction of going in and finding out what is the drug that they intend to use for executions, where is it from, what's the purity, what's the sterility, what's the expiration date? Is it being, stored in the right way? They wouldn't be able to do that. And that would extend to any activities that the Department of Corrections is doing to manufacture its own poisons, because it's not going to be making drugs to use because they're not a compounding pharmacy. They would be making poison. And that is not because the advocates outed that information. It's because the pharmacy board was doing its job. And the third example I want to give that Mr. Clements referred to from a different perspective is that there was the execution date set for Ash Wednesday 2014. We find out, I think, the Sunday before that execution that the Department of Corrections had purchased some drugs that it intended to use for that execution date. And the purchase order specified a certain concentration of the drug. We compare that to the protocol that the Department of Corrections had created to do its execution. It was not the right drug. It was a different concentration. And we filed that in the court, and the Department of Corrections, to its credit, agreed to call off the execution because they got the wrong drugs to execute that guy. And if it wasn't for those records being public, we would not have known that they had expired drugs or they simply bought the wrong drug. And I'm not here disparaging the DOC or anybody involved. Like I said, to their credit, they agreed to call off the execution, but it was only because that information was public. And when the government seeks to wield its ultimate power to kill somebody, let's do that in the open. Let's make that public. Because there's nothing more terrifying than the government killing somebody in secret. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coppell. Appreciate your testimony, and no questions for you. Mr. Constanza, you're going to be up next, and in the batter's box is Ms. Ashwini. I'm going to have to get some help with Velcomi, maybe so. But President, if you wouldn't mind, come on up. Mr. Costanza, welcome.
Good morning, Chairman Bulio and committee members. My name is Tom Costanza with the Louisiana Council of Catholic Bishops, and certainly our restorative justice concepts are victim-centered. Pray for prayer and healing across the state. We have Mass for victims and survivors of violence. Every bishop in the state has personal experience counseling with people, so certainly our church's tradition and practice is to stand with the victims. Just briefly, through the lens of Catholic social teaching related to the specifics of the secrecy side of it, I said, well, the principal secretary would say, go talk to the people that are doing it. So I went and talked to a compound pharmacist. And his first comment was, well, I'm not doing that. It was more of a moral side. It wasn't anything about afraid of. And then the second thing was, if you don't have to report to the pharmacy board, they still have to report to the feds. Now, I know this has been in Georgia. I was just trying to, how am I going to do this testimony? It got challenged in Georgia, and it won. So there may be ways that would protect that pharmacist, that compound pharmacist, who by law has to, if he doesn't have to report to the state, he must report to the feds. So I'm not enough legal side of that. And then in terms of, so that's subsidiarity, why is it that, is it just because they're afraid of being exposed, or is there a moral, deeper reality? And I don't know the total question. That would be good to, there are only about 50 compound pharmacists in the state. Maybe ask them. And I know the bill will pass. I'm just bringing up the moral dimensions of it. And the other thing would be the common good. So the other comment, the compound pharmacist says, well, listen, that's a controlled substance. That's a lethal substance. That's a dangerous substance. The public needs to know where that thing is at every point in time. That's a lethal, whatever the components are. So just from those two principles of Catholic social teaching, we offer that for your consideration. Ask your local pharmacist about it. and just, and see what they say. And so I call them deeper moral dimension, not so much the afraid of being exposed. I think there is a deeper moral dimension, especially this is a life and death decision. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Costanza, and I've enjoyed all of our visits together, and so thank you for there are no questions for you. We appreciate you being with us.
Thank you.
All right, ma'am. I know I slaughtered your name, so if you don't mind, give us a proper pronunciation and introduce yourself for the record.
No
and
worries.
We're going to have Miss Mary Patricia Ray on deck if you want to come on. Okay. Well, in that case, Mr. Zoe David Lang, you're going to be on deck if you want to come on up. But go ahead and introduce yourself for the record.
My name is Ashwini Velchami.
I would not have been able to get that. Thank you. Beautiful name, though. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you. I'm opposing this bill, but I will actually be reading a letter from a pharmacist who is taking no position but wants to raise some concerns with how this affects pharmaceutical practice. This is Dr. William Kirchain, who is the director of the Xavier University College of Pharmacy Health and Wellness Center. He teaches pharmacy law and regulation at Xavier and has served as the president of the Louisiana Pharmacists Association, the chair for public policy, Louisiana Society of Health System Pharmacists, vice chair for the Louisiana Board of Medical Examiners, advisory committee for collaborative practice, Louisiana delegate of the APHA House of Delegates, and the board of directors for the Louisiana Pharmacists Association. Thank you for drawing my attention to this proposed House Bill number 6 on execution methods and secrecy, which clearly has implications for the pharmacy profession. To my knowledge, the pharmacy community was not made aware of the bill or consulted prior to its introduction. The bill exempts pharmacists involved in the provision of execution drugs from Parts 3 to 5 of Chapter 14, Title 37 of the Louisiana Revised Statutes. This essentially removes state oversight of drugs used for executions. Since the mid-1800s, oversight by the Board of Pharmacy has always been viewed as a critical mechanism in ensuring the safety of drug and drug-related products, coupled with ensuring compliance with state and federal laws designed to control the safe manufacture and distribution of drugs. Our state was the first to require a form of examination and issue licenses to practice pharmacy. Removing oversight creates an increased risk of substandard practices and the use of unsafe or ineffective drugs. As a state law, this bill will not exempt pharmacists from compliance with federal legislation. Pharmacists have mandatory reporting obligations to the DEA for controlled substances subject to their required registration and will continue to have our compounding activities regulated by the FDA. The confidentiality provisions appear to expose pharmacists to potential criminal liability for complying with these federal requirements. Failure to comply with federal law can expose pharmacists to criminal and civil liability, fines, loss, or suspension of license and imprisonment. This creates a problematic conflict for pharmacists and pharmacy owners. Federal law governing the compounding of drugs is particularly complex. If the Louisiana Department of Corrections would need to create the facilities or capacity to compound drugs, and it would require significant funds to do so in accordance with the United States Pharmacopoeia Chapters 795, 797, and 800 requirements, federal regulations, and third-party accreditor standards. Any such facility would also be subject to costly reporting obligations and liable for violations of these same federal laws and third-party accreditation standards. Sincerely, William R. Kirchain.
Thank you for your testimony. There are no questions. We appreciate you being here with us today. Zoe, is it David or David?
David.
Okay, Zoe. See, in
I can say
in Cajun country, we'd say David. So, Zoe, if you don't mind, introduce yourself for the records. And Samantha Bosalvage, I might have slaughtered that one as well. If you're on deck. So, Zoe, introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me here. I just have a quick statement. Hi, my name is Zoe David Lang, and I'm here on behalf of Avodah. Avodah is a Jewish Service Corps program that places individuals such as myself in nonprofits in cities nationwide. I am here because Avodah, as a Jewish organization, is deeply against these secrecy laws and the gas suffocation of humans. We believe in the sanctity of human life. Secrecy laws allow secret concoctions from secret places by secret people. The people of Louisiana deserve to know what is being done in their name. Companies should not be allowed to hide in the shadows. This is not justice. I also just wanted to put on the record that Avodah is also against gas suffocation and is a part of the Jewish Community Relations Council. We voted on a resolution against gas suffocation in the state. It was right here. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Thank you. If you want to leave a copy of that with committee, we'll be happy to hand that out to our members.
Thank you.
There are no questions. Thank you for your testimony, Ms. David Lang.
Thank you.
And we'll have Ms. Samantha up next with the National Council for Jewish Women. And on deck, we're going to have Ms. Anna. I'm having trouble with an attorney representing herself. If you don't mind, you're on deck. It might be Willard or Anna. If you're in the room, you're on deck. Samantha, please introduce yourself for the record.
Good morning. My name is Samantha Basilavich. You were very close. I know it's hard. I would also butcher your name. I apologize. I'm here today, as you mentioned.
Anybody who wants to have last name challenges, I'm up for it. So.
I'm here today, as you mentioned, as a member of the National Council for Jewish Women, the New Orleans chapter. The National Council of Jewish Women is the oldest Jewish women's civil rights organization working for equity and justice, and it goes by NCJW. NCJW strongly opposes this bill in whole, including the secrecy provision. If you have to do something in secret, you shouldn't be doing it at all. Executions used to be public events, and over the years we've moved it to be hidden away, to be done in secret, limiting who can be there. Now with this bill, there is an attempt to make it even less transparent. If the state is going to enact the most awesome power it can do, the irreversible punishment, it should at the very least be done transparently. I also want to point out a fallacy that Representative Muscarella is putting forward today in an attempt to pass this bill. He said that the lack of this secrecy bill is why we aren't executing people and why we haven't had an execution since 2010 in Louisiana. That is simply false for a variety of reasons that I don't have time to get into within 3 minutes, but one of them is that there is an 84% reversal rate of death sentences in this state because our government gets it wrong more than we get it right. And some of the individuals included in that statistic are Glenn Ford and John Thompson, 2 death row exonerees that I personally had the privilege to get to know before their untimely deaths. I know that they would be here today speaking out against the secrecy portion of this bill if they were still with us, so I am here also on their behalf. I also want to speak to Representative's right question. He wasn't here earlier, so I'm glad you're back. Thank you. You had asked Mr. Cahoon earlier about the deception that could happen under this bill. And you missed the testimony from some other people that actually... Oh, you heard. Okay, great. So you heard that that isn't a hypothetical. It actually already happened in 2014 when the DOC went to Lake Charles Memorial Hospital and got a drug that it said was for a patient and not for an execution. And then the hospital said, we would have never sold it to you if we had known it was for that purpose. And if this bill becomes law, we would never have been able to find that out. So there is deception that has happened that this bill would now cover up if you pass it. And lastly, there's no real bullying actually happening. The lack of lethal injection executions is not because people have been bullied, it's because the state cannot get the drugs because no one is willing to sell them. And as Representative Marcel said, the pharmaceutical companies won't sell the drugs to the state. Even if you pass the secrecy bill, the pharmacy companies will not sell the drugs to the state. So I want to be clear that what you're doing by passing this bill is greenlighting the purchase of drugs from less reputable sources and shielding that from public accountability. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Basilavich. Did I get that right? Close?
Basilavich.
Basilavich, thank you. We appreciate your testimony. There are no questions for you. Ms. Anna Leland, is there an Anna in the room? Okay. We're going to go on next. Mr. Bruce Riley, if you don't mind coming on up, and Miss Samantha Kennedy, you're going to be on deck.
I'm actually going to pass. She waves.
She waves. Samantha Kennedy waves. Okay. All right, Mr. Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Bruce Riley. I'm the Deputy Director of Voice of the Experienced. And I just wanted to say that, first, I don't think that there's anything our government should be doing that we're not proud of, that we're not willing to stand up and say we're doing this. If it's something we need to be doing in secrecy, we should be taking notice and say we probably shouldn't be doing it. And is this a public execution or is it a private war? It's not a private war. And different things govern war as govern our criminal justice system. And everything all the way through the execution is covered by our Bill of Rights. Everything from due process to cruel and unusual punishment. So the idea that we can just turn off the spigot at the end is just false, with all due respect. Like, it's covered all the way through. And there wouldn't be litigation around drugs that people use if it wasn't covered. That question has been answered in the affirmative. This is squarely in the grounds of people's rights and also our rights, because it is state versus so-and-so. If this body or the DOC is executing somebody, it's in all of our names, including myself. And it's using my tax dollars and your tax dollars to buy these drugs. And whether these drugs are legitimate drugs or pure drugs or some knockoff that a guy made in a basement, I want to know. And I think, again, we need to put this out in the open. It should always be in the open. And I don't think, just another point, Representative Carlson, we don't hide the names of jurors. We don't have secret tribunals. That's public. That's known, right? We don't hide things in this state. But what this would do is hide a very important process, and whoever is doing the execution should be standing and counting themselves. And for those who are in support of executing the people on death row, they should be raising their hands. We should not be doing this passive-aggressive, hide the ball, let someone else do it thing. If people really are supportive of killing people in the name of the public, they should come out and say it. And they should be volunteering to push the button, not asking someone else to do it. I don't know if any of y'all want to volunteer to push the button, but I'm asking, please raise your hands. Because it's in all of our names, but we're trying to push it off to other people. And this secrecy thing only does much more of that. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. The board is clear. Thank you for your testimony. We also have, let me just double check these cards for a second. Present in opposition but not wishing to speak. Erica, your handwriting's nice and neat, and I'm still going to have trouble. Navalance with herself. Deidre Thomas in opposition, not wishing to speak. Angele Bradford. Sarah Godallo, present, not wishing to speak, in opposition. Katie Hunter Lowry, Louisiana Survivors for Reform, present, opposition, not wishing to speak. Kiara Phillips and Catherine Knight, both present, opposition, not wishing to speak. Is Representative Muscarella nearby? Oh, there you are. Sorry about that. You'd like to address any of the comments or on to your close, Representative Muscarella?
I'll do a quick close, Chairman. Thank you. Members, thank you for your time. I know this is a hot... Might not work. Thank you for your time. I know this is a very important and, tough issue to tackle. At the end of the day, we have a job to do, and I just ask for your favorable passage.
Thank you, Chairman Muscarella. I should have been doing that earlier. Members, I'm going to make a motion that we adopt House Bill 6 as amended. Is there any opposition to this? We have. Okay. Representative Larverdane objects. Madam Secretary, please call the roll. Just members, a motion, yes, moves it forward to the floor. A vote of no leaves it here in committee.
Thank you, Chairman Boyer. Chairman Boyer?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Billings? Yes. Yes. Representative Boyd? No. Representative Carlson?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Carter?
No.
No. Representative Carver?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Domain?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Farnham?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Gadberry?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Larverdane? No. No. Vice Chair Lyons?
No.
No. Representative Marcel?
No.
No. Representative Newell?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Shammerhorn?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Thomas?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Wright?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Weibel?
Yes.
Yes. We have 12 yeas and 5 nays.
Members, House Bill 6 is going to be reported favorably as amended.